my name is Maureen. I'm 62 years old, and I never imagined that my daughter's wedding would turn into one of the most unforgettable nights of my life. I had poured my heart and every penny I could spare into making it perfect. The flowers, the music, the champagne fountains sparkling under the chandeliers. I wanted everything to be magical for Rachel, my little girl who had grown up so fast. But the moment her new husband introduced me to his wealthy family, everything shifted. With a sneer and a laugh, he said, "This is the rotten, dog-stinking crone we have to put up with." The whole table erupted in laughter, and for a moment I felt my heart sink, the humiliation wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. I tried to smile politely, holding back tears, wishing I could disappear. And then something unexpected happened. His father, Robert, froze, his face going pale as he stared at me. "Wait, aren't you my new boss?" he whispered, disbelief and shock mingling in his voice. In that instant, the room fell silent and the laughter died down, replaced by tension and curiosity. That moment changed everything, not just for me, but for my daughter, her new husband, and everyone in that room. You won't believe what unfolded next, how secrets were revealed, and how I turned this humiliation into something extraordinary. But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. I love reading your comments and knowing where you are. Now let's see how this story really began. I stood in the grand ballroom, my eyes tracing the cascade of champagne spilling from the fountain I had meticulously arranged, its golden bubbles catching the light from the crystal chandeliers above. The room buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the subtle hum of well-dressed guests exchanging pleasantries, but my heart felt lodged in a knot. I had imagined this day for Rachel so differently, dreamed of it in soft pinks and golds, and yet here I was, feeling every bit the outsider in a celebration that should have been about joy. I adjusted the delicate folds of my gown and tried to smile, reminding myself to breathe. Through the wide glass doors of the ballroom, I glimpsed Bailey, my faithful border collie, sitting patiently in the car. His head tilted slightly, ears perked as if he sensed my unease. Rachel had insisted he'd stay outside. "Mom, he'll ruin the aesthetic," she'd said, her voice that mix of youthful certainty and tender reprimand that only a daughter could wield. And so, Bailey obeyed, sitting quietly, tail swishing softly against the leather seat, waiting for me. I wished I could have him here. I wished I could have that grounding presence beside me, a tether to a world that still felt safe amidst the storm of humiliation I was about to endure. I straightened my shoulders as Derek approached, the new husband of my daughter, whose presence seemed to fill the room with an invisible tension. His eyes narrowed slightly as he took my hand, and the words that followed hit me like a slap I hadn't anticipated. "This is the rotten, dog-stinking crone we have to put up with," he said, voice dripping with contempt. My fingers froze in his. A polite smile plastered over the shock and anger threatening to erupt. The room erupted with laughter, the kind that slices through a person's dignity and leaves echoes long after. Caroline, his mother, covered her mouth with a manicured hand, eyes glinting with the kind of amusement that masked calculation, while his brother's smirk suggested he too found delight in my embarrassment. I felt my chest tighten, each laugh from the table like a tiny hammer striking at the core of my composure. I forced my jaw to relax, willed the tightness from my stomach to dissipate, and looked toward the exit. That's when I noticed Derek's father, Robert Sterling, standing slightly apart, his fork suspended mid-air as he stared at me with wide eyes. Something flickered in that gaze, a sudden recognition that made the laughter in the room fade into a dull background hum. "Wait, ... aren't you the new CEO?" he whispered, his voice a mixture of disbelief and awe. I swallowed hard, a polite smile curving my lips, but my heart pounded so violently I thought it might betray me. "Yes, I am," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I excused myself gracefully, the weight of their judgment pressing against me with every step, and made my way to the glass doors leading to the parking lot. Bailey greeted me with a flurry of warmth and relief the moment I opened the door. His tongue licked my tears, his eyes soft and comforting, grounding me in a reality where love was uncomplicated and judgment non-existent. I sank into the driver's seat, hands trembling as I wrapped them around his fur. "It's all right, boy," I whispered. "It's going to be all right." The quiet loyalty in his gaze reminded me that even when the world was cruel, there were constant moments and beings whose love remained steadfast. That night, after the guests had left and the echoes of laughter had dissipated, I sat on the edge of my bed, Bailey nestled at my feet. The dress from the wedding hung across the chair, a silent testament to the day's humiliation and my endurance. My mind wandered through the events, retracing each insult, each sneer, each laugh that had threatened to make me feel small. Yet beneath the sting, beneath the embarrassment, there was a seed of something else, a determination, quiet but insistent, that this would not define me. The next morning brought a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. My phone buzzed softly, and when I saw Robert Sterling's name, my breath caught. "We need to talk. Monday morning. My office," the message read. I looked down at Bailey, whose ears twitched as if he understood the gravity of the message better than I did. I scratched behind his ears, whispering, "Things are about to change, boy. We're just getting started." Later that day, Rachel called, her voice light and filled with that naive excitement that mothers so often envy. "Mom, Derek's family wants to meet you for brunch tomorrow? They were so impressed," she exclaimed. I felt a mix of relief and tension twist inside me. Their impressions might be shifting, but the work ahead would demand every ounce of patience, every flicker of resolve I could muster. As I placed the phone down, Bailey's head rested against my knee, his warmth a quiet comfort. In his gaze, I found the courage to face what was coming. He had been my constant, my anchor, through victories and losses alike. And in that moment, I realized that humiliation could be endured, but true strength came from knowing who stood beside you when the world laughed at your expense. I sat in the dim light of the parking lot, the engine ticking as it cooled, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. The night air pressed against the car windows, cool and unyielding. But it did nothing to ease the heat of humiliation that still burned in my chest. Bailey, ever vigilant, pressed his soft muzzle against my trembling fingers, licking my tears as though he could draw out my shame and replace it with comfort. His warm brown eyes met mine, and in them, I found something I hadn't felt in hours, a quiet reassurance that I was not alone, that I was still capable of standing tall, even when the world seemed bent on knocking me down. I had kept my recent promotion a secret, a carefully guarded triumph I had longed to reveal at the perfect moment. 3 months ago, I had been approached by a headhunter, a discreet message that carried the weight of an entirely new life. Sterling Industries, the family empire Robert's ancestors had built with sweat, vision, and decades of labor, was struggling, and they wanted me to turn it around. They saw my track record at my previous company, how I had resurrected a floundering business, salvaged jobs, and restored confidence, and they believed I could do the same for them. The position came with power, responsibility, and the chance to make a difference on a scale I had only dreamed of. I had been cautious, deliberate, savoring the moment I would finally surprise Rachel, imagining her eyes widening in pride, her voice trembling with admiration. I wanted this to be a gift, not another story where she thought her mother was timid or powerless. But tonight, in the shadow of her wedding humiliation, all of that secrecy weighed on me differently. I wondered if I had misjudged the timing, whether my silence had left me vulnerable rather than victorious. And yet, as Bailey nestled closer, his body a living anchor against the storm of my emotions, I realized that this was the calm before my transformation, the prelude to a change that would not just alter perceptions, but redefine the path I was on. Back in my apartment later that night, Bailey refused to leave my side. I unpacked the dress from the wedding, its delicate folds and shimmering fabric a silent reminder of the day's events. My fingers brushed over the satin as I set it aside, each motion slow, deliberate, as if by touching the fabric I could also touch the remnants of my courage and reclaim them. Bailey's eyes never left me, wide and observant, his head tilting with concern as I sank into the chair and let the tears fall again. Quieter now, less about shame and more about the exhaustion of holding everything together. "It's okay," I whispered, my voice catching. "We're going to fix this, boy. We're going to make it right." My phone buzzed on the table, the vibration sharp in the quiet room. The screen lit up with Robert Sterling's name. My heart jumped. I held the phone in my hand, breath caught in my throat, and read the succinct message. "We need to talk. Monday morning. My office." It was businesslike, almost cold, but underneath, I sensed the tremor of recognition. He knew. He had seen through the surface, through the composure I had tried to maintain, and he wanted to confront the reality I carried quietly, but with quiet strength. I leaned down and scratched Bailey's ears, feeling the warmth of his fur against my fingers, and whispered softly, "Things are about to change, boy. Big things, but we'll face them together." He thumped his tail lightly, nudged my hand, and I allowed myself the smallest smile. There was courage in this moment, a delicate bloom that felt fragile but undeniable. The night was long, filled with restless thoughts and small bursts of hope, and through it all, Bailey remained my unwavering companion. A sentinel for my doubts and a reminder of my own resilience. The next morning arrived with an odd mixture of calm and anticipation. The sky was a pale wash of soft oranges and grays, the city stirring quietly around me. My phone rang, cutting through the morning stillness. Rachel's voice, bright and full of unfiltered excitement, greeted me on the line. "Mom! Derek's family wants to meet you for brunch tomorrow. They were so impressed." She sounded oblivious to the storm that had brewed in the shadows of her wedding, and for a fleeting moment, I wanted to shield her from all of it, to wrap her in a bubble where she could only feel love and warmth. Yet beneath my maternal instincts, a surge of resolve pulsed through me. This was my moment not to impress them, not to beg for approval, but to assert quietly, powerfully, that I was more than the humiliations of the past hours. I could see already that the days ahead would be difficult, fraught with tension, but they were also the threshold of a transformation I had waited years to embrace. I hung up the phone and Bailey leaned into me, resting his head on my lap, eyes closing briefly in trust and patience. I stroked his ears slowly, feeling the tension in my own body begin to loosen. "We've got work to do, boy," I whispered, my voice steadier now, tinged with a new strength. "We're going to show them who we really are." The warmth of the morning sun filtered through the blinds, brushing my face with soft light. And I realized that even in moments of doubt and humiliation, there was always the possibility of renewal. That night had taught me that strength could be quiet, resilience could be patient, and transformation could begin in the smallest, most intimate ways. With Bailey at my side, I felt ready not just to confront the world, but to embrace the power I had earned, the dignity I had preserved, and the life I had yet to shape. Tomorrow's brunch would be more than a meeting. It would be a step into a new reality, a first page of a chapter where courage and love would guide every decision, every word, every action. And as I looked down at Bailey, his fur brushing against my hands, I knew with certainty we were ready. Brunch arrived with the soft hum of clinking silverware and muted conversations that floated through the warm, sunlit restaurant. I walked in carefully, each step deliberate, my posture a fragile balance between composure and the storm that still raged beneath my skin. The air smelled faintly of freshly brewed coffee and buttered pastries, comforting scents that did little to ease the tension knotted in my chest. Carolyn Sterling was the first to rise, her hand extended, fingers cold against mine. Her apology tumbled from her lips like water over stone, relentless and awkward. "I'm so sorry, truly, we didn't expect." Yet her eyes betrayed her. Beneath the practiced regret, I could see the glint of calculation, the subtle weighing of my worth, my achievements, my presence. It was a look I had seen often in the boardrooms of my past, and it told me everything I needed to know about the game I was about to play. "We had no idea Rachel's mother was so accomplished," she continued, her voice soft but deliberate as she touched my hand. Her skin was cool, almost shockingly so, and I pulled my hand back gently, politely, masking the shiver that ran up my arm. I nodded, smiling just enough to keep the tension at bay, even as my mind traced the labyrinth of deceit and pride woven into this family. Across the table, Derek sat rigid, his fork clutched tightly as if it were a lifeline, eyes darting nervously, unable to meet mine. His jaw was tight, lips pressed into a thin line that betrayed frustration and fear, a look I could almost taste, a bitter cocktail of guilt and panic. I watched him closely, feeling the weight of the knowledge that my daughter had unknowingly married someone entirely different than she imagined. Each stolen glance, each micro-expression, confirmed the unease I had sensed for weeks, but had yet to confront fully. I had brought Bailey with me, knowing I would need the solace of his presence, his quiet, unassuming strength. Initially, he had remained leashed outside, a loyal sentinel keeping watch as I stepped into a room that felt hostile despite the polite smiles. But when I glimpsed him through the window, pacing anxiously, ears alert and eyes wide, my heart clenched. The hostess, understanding more from my glance than from words, allowed me to bring him in, nodding as I explained that he was a service dog providing emotional support. Bailey's presence beneath the table was immediate and grounding. His soft fur brushed my ankles, the rhythmic rise and fall of his breathing a reminder that I was not alone, that I could face whatever came next with someone steadfast by my side. Robert Sterling pulled me aside discreetly, his hand brief on my shoulder, eyes briefly searching mine. "My son is a fool," he whispered, his voice low, almost a murmur that only I could hear. There was a tremor in his tone, a flicker of worry, but beneath it lay a sense of respect, or perhaps acknowledgement, that I had arrived in a world where intelligence and resilience mattered. But family is family. "I hope this won't affect our working relationship." His words hung in the air, a tentative bridge between respect and obligation. And I nodded slightly, aware of the delicate balance I would need to maintain while navigating both business and family loyalties. Returning to the table, I felt the familiar tension of observation settle over me. Derek leaned toward Rachel, voice low and insidious. Words I barely caught, but that sent a chill straight to my bones. "We need that inheritance, babe. Play nice with your mom now." His hand brushed hers, subtle, manipulative, a silent attempt to bind her to his scheme. Bailey's ears pricked, his body tensing under the table. A low, cautious growl escaped his throat, a sound meant only for those who threatened the people he loved. I froze for a moment, the realization coiling in my stomach like a live wire. My daughter, sweet, trusting Rachel, had married a con artist. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on me, a heavy mantle of fear, protectiveness, and sorrow. My hand brushed against Bailey's fur, and I whispered softly, "We'll fix this, boy, I promise." His warmth seeped into me, grounding me as I struggled to keep the tears at bay. The words that needed to be spoken were not yet ready for public air. The confrontation would come, but for now, vigilance and quiet observation were our allies. As Carolyn continued to apologize, her voice a melodic but hollow echo in the sunlit room, I felt a strange blend of pity and resolve. She had underestimated me, assumed my silence was weakness, but the truth of my capabilities was now illuminated in the harshest, most undeniable light. Each calculated glance, each carefully worded phrase, each subtle betrayal that I could sense beneath the surface was now part of a larger picture. I was no longer the woman they could dismiss lightly. I was the axis around which their world would need to pivot. Through it all, Bailey remained my anchor, the steady presence beneath the table, a reminder that loyalty and love were not measured by appearances or social standing. His gaze met mine occasionally, steady and unwavering, conveying a confidence that bolstered my own. I breathed in slowly, letting the warmth of his body, the rhythm of his trust, remind me that the storm of deception and manipulation could be weathered, that strength was as much about patience and observation as it was about action. By the time brunch concluded, and the polite laughter and small talk wound down, I felt the first stirrings of a new clarity. I understood the terrain now, the players, and the stakes. Derek's schemes, Robert's tentative respect, Caroline's calculated chamal were pieces in a puzzle I was beginning to assemble. And at the center of it all, Bailey's unwavering presence reminded me that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to stand firm despite it. I left the restaurant with my head held higher than when I had entered, Bailey at my side, the sunlight warming my shoulders as we walked. My mind was already strategizing, quietly turning over each word, each glance, each subtle sign of deceit I had observed. And though a storm still lingered on the horizon, I felt a flicker of something powerful determination. The family secret had begun to unravel, and with it, a path toward truth, justice, and reclamation of everything that mattered most. Back home, the familiar scent of old wood and faint traces of lavender lingered in the air, a comforting reminder of stability amidst the chaos I had walked through that morning. Yet even as I set down my coat and shook off the lingering tension, Derek's words echoed relentlessly in my mind. "We need that inheritance, babe. Play nice with your mom now." The phrase twisted and turned in my thoughts, gnawing at me, refusing to let me settle into the quiet refuge of my home. It was not just a threat, it was a revelation, a lens through which every interaction, every subtle manipulation, now took on a sharper, more dangerous meaning. My stomach knotted as I tried to reconcile the idea that my daughter, sweet, trusting Rachel, had been unknowingly ensnared in a web of deceit. Bailey, ever perceptive, padded softly over to my side, his head tilting with concern as he settled beside me. His brown eyes searched mine, waiting, steady and patient, offering solace in a language that needed no words. I ran my fingers through his soft fur, feeling the calming rhythm of his presence seep into me, anchoring me against the storm of doubt and anger swirling in my mind. It was in that quiet companionship that I found the courage to act, to step beyond despair into action. I pulled out the stack of documents I had carefully kept tucked away over the years, my late husband's estate papers, meticulously organized, and Rachel's trust fund information, each folder a fragile repository of memories and hard-won security. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the pages, each one a testament to the life I had tried to protect, the legacy I had hoped to safeguard for my daughter. But as I moved through the accounts, a cold unease began to settle over me. Something was off. Several accounts showed activity that I did not recognize, subtle shifts that suggested more than just mismanagement. The numbers themselves whispered of intrusion, of silent hands reshaping what should have been untouchable, and a chill ran down my spine. I picked up my phone and dialed Patricia, my longtime friend and trusted lawyer. Her voice, warm and calm, answered after a few rings. I hesitated only briefly, then explained what I had seen, the concern tightening in my chest. Patricia listened without interruption, and when I had finished, she sighed softly, a sound heavy with empathy and understanding. "We'll handle this quietly," she said, her tone resolute but gentle. "I'll dig into everything, make sure nothing is overlooked, and I'll keep you informed every step of the way." Relief washed over me, tempered by the gravity of what lay ahead. It was the first step toward reclaiming control, toward understanding the true scale of the danger lurking in the guise of familial affection. Meanwhile, my professional life could not pause for the turmoil at home. At Sterling Industries, Robert Sterling's presence weighed differently now. During executive meetings, I noticed subtle signs of unease and eye that flickered too long. Hands that fidgeted over papers, a forced casualness in tone that betrayed an awareness of scrutiny. His quarterly reports, which I had reviewed routinely, revealed discrepancies that my instinct had flagged, but which I had not yet investigated. The numbers were small, almost imperceptible anomalies, but patterns emerged beneath the surface, and I felt the first threads of a larger tapestry begin to take shape. It was a dance of caution, observation, and quiet preparation, a strategy that required patience and vigilance. That evening, Rachel came over. Her arrival brought a warmth tinged with fragility, her steps light but hesitant. I tried to speak to her gently, to broach the subject that had been gnawing at my mind, to warn her of the insidiousness I had begun to see in Derek. But she cut me off, her voice a mixture of defiance and hurt, tinged with the raw honesty that only children can wield. "You're just jealous. I found love, Mom. You've been alone since Dad died," she said, her words sharp, but her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I felt the sting of truth in her accusation, the loneliness that had shadowed me since my husband's death, but I could not let it cloud the purpose that had crystallized in my heart. I swallowed my own hurt, forcing my voice to remain steady, reassuring even as my chest ached. After she left, the apartment felt emptier, the walls echoing the quiet absence of her presence. I sank into the chair, weary but determined, and Bailey immediately curled at my feet, resting his head gently on my lap. His warmth seeped into me, a balm against the ache of isolation, the sharp edges of betrayal, and the weight of responsibility pressing on my shoulders. I ran my fingers through his soft fur, allowing the tears to fall freely this time, each one a release of tension, fear, and unspoken frustration. The quiet companionship, the unwavering loyalty of a creature who loved without expectation, reminded me that courage could be drawn from the smallest acts of trust and connection. As the night deepened and shadows stretched across the room, I began to make a mental map of what needed to be done. Patricia would investigate the accounts, uncover the truth of Derek's manipulation, and protect what was mine by right. I would watch, observe, and prepare, gathering evidence, noting behaviors, and understanding the full scale of the threat. The unease I had felt earlier transformed into a simmering determination, a clarity that tempered my fear with resolve. Every whispered threat, every deceptive glance, every calculated word from Derek and his family would be met with vigilance and strategy. Bailey stirred slightly, lifting his head to nuzzle my hand, and I whispered to him softly, "We're going to fix this, boy, together." The night stretched on, quiet and contemplative, the soft ticking of the clock a metronome to my thoughts. In the solitude, I understood that the journey ahead would test every ounce of patience, courage, and resilience I possessed, but I also understood that I was not powerless. The combination of my knowledge, Patricia's expertise, and Bailey's unwavering presence created a force greater than fear, greater than manipulation, and more enduring than deception. In the stillness of that evening, with papers spread before me and the gentle weight of Bailey at my feet, I allowed myself the first true sense of hope in days. The storm was not over, but I had begun to navigate it. The path forward was fraught with challenges, yes, but it was also a path illuminated by clarity, love, and steadfast companionship. And in that quiet, intimate moment, I realized that survival was not enough. I would reclaim, restore, and rise, stronger than before, with the unwavering support of my loyal friend Bailey at my side. The phone rang late in the morning, sharp and insistent, pulling me from the quiet contemplation I had allowed myself after the tense days of observation and preparation. Patricia's voice was steady, but the weight behind it immediately set my heart pounding. "Maureen," she said, taking a breath that seemed heavier than necessary, "I've uncovered something devastating." I braced myself, gripping Bailey's soft fur as he rested against my legs, his warm body grounding me even as the room felt suddenly too large, too empty. Derek had been slowly draining Rachel's trust fund, she explained, siphoning money in increments subtle enough to go unnoticed, yet significant enough to jeopardize the security I had fought to protect for my daughter. Each word felt like a hammer, striking at the foundations of my calm, and I felt a cold rush of anger and disbelief coil inside me. But the revelations did not end there. Patricia's voice dropped further, a note of tension threading through her usual composure. "It's worse, Maureen. Rachel gave him power of attorney over your accounts too. He forged your signature." The room tilted slightly, a vertigo of betrayal and shock, and Bailey pressed closer, his head nudging against my knee as if he sensed the fragility of my composure. I leaned into him, drawing courage from his unwavering loyalty. I felt my fingers tremble over the arm of the chair, gripping it as if it could anchor me against the whirlwind of emotions threatening to sweep me away. Anger, fear, disbelief, all swirling together into a storm I could not yet name. Patricia paused, letting the weight of her words settle before continuing. "There's more. Derek's brother, Julian, works in Sterling Industries' accounting department. I suspect they're embezzling funds from the company itself." My mind reeled, the edges of reality bending as I envisioned the scope of deception. A son betraying my daughter. A brother colluding in a scheme against a company I had come to lead. My chest tightened, the world spinning slightly as I tried to steady my breath. Bailey's soft nudge reminded me that panic would not solve this. Clarity and action were my only allies. The next day at work, I moved deliberately, each step measured. I initiated a quiet internal audit, ensuring external investigators were brought in to meticulously comb through every financial record, every transaction, every thread that might reveal the extent of Julian and Derek's duplicity. The hum of the office around me, the soft click of keyboards and distant murmur of conference calls, contrasted sharply with the intensity of my inner focus. I could feel Bailey's presence even in his absence, a mental anchor reminding me that patience and vigilance were as critical as confrontation. As I reviewed documents and conferred with investigators, a shadow appeared in the hallway. Robert Sterling, his face tight with anger and disbelief, blocked my path. His voice was low, urgent, almost pleading. "Whatever you're doing, stop. My family has built this company for 40 years, he said, the weight of legacy and pride infusing every word. It looked him squarely in the eye, seeing the fear beneath his bravado, the realization that his control was slipping. "And I'm here to make sure it survives another 40, I said, my voice steady, resolute, unwavering. "Step aside, Robert." The air between us crackled with tension, a battle waged without physical force but with every ounce of conviction. That night, the quiet of my home was shattered. A noise, subtle at first, became unmistakable, the scraping of a door handle, a soft thud on the window. Instinctively, Bailey leapt from his bed and began barking with a ferocity that filled the house. A raw, protective energy that left no room for hesitation. My heart raced, but the sound of his alertness gave me a strange sense of power, a feeling that no intruder could step further without reckoning. The intruder, startled by Bailey's barking and unyielding presence, retreated into the darkness, leaving the house and my peace intact. I sank into the sofa afterward, feeling the adrenaline ebb from my body in quiet waves. Bailey curled tightly beside me, his head resting against my lap, a silent testament to loyalty and love unbroken by fear or chaos. I ran my fingers through his fur, letting the warmth and steady presence soothe the storm within me. Each revelation, each betrayal, each challenge had been devastating. Yet I felt the first stirrings of clarity, of control, of a path forward that no amount of deceit could sever. In the stillness, I allowed myself a single, deep breath, letting the weight of what I had discovered settle fully. The magnitude of Derek's and Julian's betrayals was staggering. Yet I felt a resolve ignite in me, a quiet flame of determination and purpose. The work ahead would be difficult, demanding, and fraught with confrontation, but it was necessary, not just to reclaim what was ours, but to protect Rachel, to safeguard Sterling Industries, and to ensure that integrity prevailed where greed had sought to dominate. I looked down at Bailey, his eyes reflecting trust, patience, and unwavering loyalty, and I whispered softly, "We're going to fix this, boy, together. No one's going to hurt our family or take what we've built." The night outside remained quiet, shadows stretching across familiar walls, but within me, a shift had occurred. Humiliation and fear had no place here. Only vigilance, courage, and the resolve to protect what mattered most. And as Bailey pressed closer, grounding me with his warmth, I knew that the journey toward justice had truly begun, and that we would face it side by side, unyielding and unstoppable. The morning air felt sharper than usual as I walked into the office, Bailey padding softly at my heels, his presence a steady reassurance amid the swirling tension of the past days. The break-in at my home had rattled me, yet it had also illuminated the depths of the threat. Police had traced the intrusion back to Julian Sterling, Derek's brother, confirming what Patricia and I had suspected. This was no isolated act, but a deliberate attempt to intimidate, to disrupt, to steal what we had worked so hard to protect. Bailey's fur brushed against my ankles as I moved toward my office, and I felt a flicker of courage spark in my chest, the warmth of his loyalty grounding me against the anxiety that threatened to rise. With Patricia's help, I moved quickly. We froze every account Derek had accessed, ensuring that no further damage could be done. Each call, each form, each verification process felt like an armor being placed around my daughter, around my family, around the life I had fought to safeguard. Filing charges was a cold, deliberate act, but necessary. Every decision carried weight, yet I could feel Bailey's reassuring presence as a gentle pulse beneath my feet, a reminder that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The emergency board meeting loomed like a storm on the horizon. I entered the room, Bailey seated obediently by my side, the rhythm of his breathing a calming counterpoint to the tension in the air. The board members exchanged glances, unease rippling through their expressions as I began to present the evidence we had gathered. Slide after slide, document after document, I revealed the extent of the Sterling family's embezzlement. $2, $3 million siphoned over 5 years, hidden in plain sight, masked by careful accounting and familial trust. The magnitude of the betrayal was almost tangible, the air thick with the weight of secrets exposed. Robert Sterling's face darkened as I spoke, his jaw tight, eyes narrowing. When I finished, he leaned forward, his voice low and sharp with threat. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his words heavy with the authority he had wielded for decades. "You're jeopardizing everything my family has built." I met his gaze without flinching, feeling the subtle warmth of Bailey's body pressing against my leg, his quiet vigilance reinforcing the resolve that had carried me this far. "And I'm here to make sure it survives another 40, I replied calmly, each word deliberate, unwavering. "Either you step down voluntarily, or this goes public and destroys your family legacy." The room held its breath, tension coiling like a living thing, and I sensed the shift before it became visible. The majority of shareholders now aligned. A quiet but potent support that Robert could not ignore. Throughout the chaos, Bailey had become my constant companion in the office, a calm center in a storm of accusations, whispers, and strategy. He lay beneath my desk, occasionally lifting his head to meet mine, eyes steady, patient, reassuring. I stroked his fur absent-mindedly during long discussions, allowing the simple act to temper my anxiety and sharpen my focus. His presence reminded me of why I was fighting, not just for the company, but for integrity, for Rachel, for the quiet hope that right would triumph over deceit. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed insistently. Rachel's voice filled the line, sharp, panicked, and tinged with frustration. "How could you freeze my money? Derek says you're trying to ruin my marriage." Her words, though shouted, carried a tremor of confusion and fear beneath the surface. I could hear the love she still held for him, the trust she had placed in the wrong hands, and my heart ached for the innocence that had been manipulated so thoroughly. I inhaled slowly, centering myself, allowing Bailey's soft sigh at my feet to steady my own pulse. "Come home, sweetheart," I said, my voice low, calm, gentle. "There's something you need to see." I left the words suspended in the air, knowing they carried more weight than any argument or explanation. I could feel the gravity of the coming confrontation, the potential for anger, confusion, and tears. Yet beneath it all lay the certainty that truth, once revealed, could heal, could restore, could guide her safely back to clarity. Bailey shifted slightly, pressing closer, and I felt the warmth of his presence infuse me with strength. The power dynamics at play were no longer abstract. They were real, immediate, and pressing. Yet, despite the intensity, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a subtle joy in knowing that preparation, vigilance, and courage had placed us firmly in control. The deception of Derek and his family, the threat of Robert's intimidation, the complex web of lies, they all now had a counterweight, grounded in truth and an unwavering resolve. As I hung up the phone, I looked around my office, the soft light filtering through the blinds, illuminating the documents, the charts, and the evidence that had brought us to this point. Bailey lifted his head, eyes meeting mine, and in that simple, silent exchange, I felt a profound certainty we had endured. We had protected what mattered, and we were on the cusp of reclaiming not just control over a company or finances, but over the dignity, security, and hope that Derek and Julian had tried so desperately to destroy. The day ended not with victory, not yet, but with the promise of it. Rachel's return home, the eventual reckoning with the deception she had unknowingly lived through, and the firm foundation of truth we had established with Patricia's guidance, all of it formed the bedrock of what was to come. And as Bailey rested his head on my lap once again, I whispered softly, more to myself than to him, "We're just getting started, boy. Just getting started." The house felt impossibly quiet when Rachel arrived. The faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant whisper of traffic outside doing nothing to mask the tension between us. Bailey patted softly at my heels as I led her into the living room. The papers and documents spread carefully across the coffee table like a battlefield map. Each sheet, each statement, each highlighted line told a story, a narrative of deception, manipulation, and greed. I gestured toward them, my voice steady but gentle. "Rachel, I need you to see this. Everything." Her eyes widened as she leaned forward, fingers trembling as she picked up the first stack of bank statements. I watched the subtle quiver in her lips, the rapid blink of disbelief, the slow burning comprehension in her eyes. Then came the forged signatures, the messages Derek had sent Julian, His words laid bare. Keep her distracted. Bleed the old lady dry. My daughter's face paled, her lips parting slightly, a sharp intake of breath punctuating the horror that began to settle over her. The fragile armor of denial she had built for months crumbled in an instant. Rachel's knees buckled and she collapsed onto my couch. Bailey was immediately at her side, curling protectively around her, his head resting gently against hers, offering comfort in the language of loyalty and presence. Her body shook with sobs, raw and uncontrolled, and I felt my own throat tighten as I reached for her, placing a hand on her back, rubbing in slow, steady circles. The pain etched in her face mirrored the fear and heartbreak I had felt in my own moments of betrayal, and I ached to absorb some of it for her, to ease the jagged edges of realization that now pierced her so sharply. "I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know," she cried, her voice breaking, trembling with regret and shock. Her hands clutched mine, as if by anchoring herself to me, she could regain some sense of balance. The tears streamed freely, a mixture of sorrow, guilt, and fear, each one a testament to the trust she had placed in Derek and the depth of his betrayal. I held her tighter, letting her grief unfold without interruption, knowing that silence and presence could sometimes heal more than words ever could. As Rachel's sobs gradually subsided into ragged, shuddering breaths, she began to speak, her voice fragile, hesitant yet urgent. He's been doing this for over a year. He isolated me, Mom. He convinced me that you were bitter, controlling, jealous, that you didn't want me to be happy. He made me feel guilty for even thinking about you. Each word cut through me like shards of glass. The knowledge of how thoroughly Derek had manipulated her both enraging and heartbreaking. I stroked her hair gently, whispering reassurances, my own tears threatening to break free, and felt Bailey press closer, his body a constant source of calm in the storm of emotion. Rachel's eyes glistened with fresh tears, and she continued, her voice barely audible. He pressured me to make you sign over your house. He said it would be better for all of us, that we'd live together, that it would be nice for you to have family clothes. Her words, whispered and trembling, carried the weight of betrayal and the fragile hope she had been manipulated into believing. The betrayal was layered, insidious, and I felt my own anger simmer, tempered by the need to hold her steady, to protect her as much as I protected our home and our lives. A sudden, sharp chime at the doorbell shattered the fragile moment. I looked through the peephole, my heart lurching. Derek stood there, his face twisted with rage, eyes dark and hard, his presence radiating threat. "Rachel, get in the car, now!" he barked, his voice slicing through the quiet of the house, leaving an edge of terror in its wake. Instinct took over. Bailey sprang to his feet in an instant, positioning himself between Derek and Rachel, his body low, teeth bared, a growl rumbling from deep in his chest. The sheer intensity of his protective stance made Derek falter, just enough for me to act. I stepped forward slowly, voice calm but unwavering. "Not today, Derek, not in this house, not with her," I said, feeling the tremor of fury beneath my words, the certainty that no intimidation would succeed here. Bailey's eyes never left Derek's, a silent warning of the consequences of crossing the line. Derek's jaw tightened, nostrils flaring, but the subtle pause, the microsecond of doubt, was all the leverage I needed to reclaim control of the situation. Rachel pressed herself closer to me, tears still glistening, trembling but beginning to find the fragile strength that comes with revelation. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her against me, feeling the tension drain slightly as she leaned into the warmth and safety of home. Bailey's low growl softened, a gentle rumble of reassurance now that the immediate threat had been paused. We stood like that for a long moment, the three of us, mother, daughter, and loyal companion, anchored against the chaos outside. The room felt heavier somehow, the weight of betrayal and revelation mingling with the first spark of clarity and courage. I whispered softly to Rachel, "It's okay, sweetheart. It's not your fault. You're safe now and we'll fix this together." Her body relaxed slightly, trembling less. Her breaths still uneven but steadying, and I felt a surge of protective love that coiled around both of us like a shield. Bailey pressed his head gently against my lap, and I felt the warmth of his presence infuse me with resolve. The awakening had begun, not just for Rachel, but for the truth itself. Deception, manipulation, and lies had been exposed, and in their place, a fragile but growing trust, courage, and the promise of restoration began to take root. The storm had not passed, but for the first time, I felt the sense of control, of readiness, of quiet power to confront what lay ahead. As Derek's shadow lingered briefly at the door, I met Rachel's eyes and whispered, "We face him together. And we'll make sure this ends right." Her grip on my hand tightened, a silent promise of solidarity, and in that moment, with Bailey at our side, I understood that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal when love, loyalty, and truth stood unwaveringly at the center. The morning sun cast long, pale streaks across my living room floor as I sat quietly with Bailey at my side, the soft rumble of his breath grounding me in a fragile peace. The plan had been set in motion days ago, every detail arranged with care, every step considered, every potential pitfall anticipated. I had ensured that the police would be nearby, discreet, yet ready, their presence a silent shield against any misstep. The moment Derek appeared, aggressive, entitled, convinced of his untouchability, the officers moved with swift precision. He struggled briefly, shouting accusations and threats, but the handcuffs clicked around his wrists with finality, the first tangible taste of justice I had orchestrated. Yet even as the adrenaline ebbed, reality intruded. Derek made bail quickly, his freedom bought with the obscene wealth his mother, Caroline Sterling, had leveraged to hire the finest legal minds money could buy. The stark contrast between the immediate satisfaction of his arrest and the lingering unease of knowing he could manipulate the system left me unsettled. Bailey rested his head on my lap, his soft eyes watching me with unwavering loyalty, silently urging patience, resilience, and focus. It was a bitter reminder that the fight was far from over, that victory was always more complex than a single moment of triumph. At work, the reverberations of the Sterling family's corruption grew louder. The board convened an emergency session and, after careful deliberation, voted to remove Robert as chairman. Julian, whose complicity had been exposed through meticulous documentation, was terminated and now faced criminal charges. The weight of consequence settled over the company like a cleansing wave. Yet the relief was tempered by the knowledge that power alone did not heal the wounds inflicted by deceit. I was offered Robert's position permanently, a symbol of authority and success that should have filled me with pride, but a strange emptiness lingered in its shadow. Something felt incomplete, as though the formal title could never fully repair the damage inflicted by lies and betrayal, or restore the trust fractured by manipulation. Even as the company shifted, Derek launched a subtle yet vicious counterattack. Rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by the resources of Caroline Sterling and the cunning of his lawyers. I was painted as a bitter old woman, fabricating evidence, unable to accept my daughter's happiness. The sting of public misrepresentation cut sharply, but I refused to engage directly with their narrative. Instead, I focused on the tangible truth documented, evidence secured, and the quiet resilience of those who knew the reality behind the facade. Rachel moved back home shortly afterward, fragile and traumatized. Her eyes, once bright with trust and naive confidence, now carried shadows of fear and doubt. She spoke little at first, retreating into herself, yet Bailey seemed to understand completely. He pressed himself against her when she sat on the couch, nudged her hand gently when she flinched, and rested his head on her lap as if to whisper that safety and love were still here. I watched the subtle ways they communicated, a silent symphony of comfort and reassurance, and felt the first stirrings of hope that she might begin to heal, piece by fragile piece. Then came the final, shocking revelation, discovered by Patricia as she combed through the remaining threads of Derek's deceit. "Maureen," she said, her voice taut with controlled excitement, "we've got him on bigamy too. His first wife lives in Nevada and they have 2 children. He's been living a double life all along." I froze, the implications spinning through my mind like a whirlpool. Derek's web of lies was even more extensive than we had imagined. His manipulation was not confined to my daughter or the company he had built a second life. Hidden in plain sight, deceiving multiple families. And yet this revelation carried with it the power to dismantle his entire persona. Patricia's eyes gleamed with the glimmer of strategy. "But I have a better idea for how to use this information," she said, leaning closer, her tone conspiratorial, yet calculated. I felt a surge of gratitude and relief, recognizing the skill, insight, and loyalty she brought to our fight. Together, we began to weave the next phase of our plan, one that would not merely punish deception, but also illuminate the truth, restore dignity, and protect those who had been hurt by his actions. As the evening drew near, I sat with Rachel and Bailey in the quiet of the living room. Rachel's hand rested lightly on Bailey's head, her fingers moving in soft, soothing circles. I watched her, marveling at the resilience budding within her, fragile but undeniable. "Mom," she whispered, voice small yet resolute, "thank you for protecting me, for seeing what I couldn't." I brushed a strand of hair from her face, holding her gaze, and felt the gravity of our shared experience settle into a bond stronger than fear, betrayal, or anger. Bailey shifted, nudging her gently, and I whispered to both of them, "We're not done yet, but we're ready. Together we'll see this through, and no one will hurt our family again." The soft glow of the lamplight caught the edges of the documents we had compiled. The evidence that had begun to dismantle Derek's empire of lies. The journey was far from over, yet for the first time in months, there was a sense of true possibility. A fragile but powerful promise that right would triumph, that integrity could be restored, and that love and loyalty could guide us through even the most treacherous terrain. In the quiet of that room, the rhythm of Bailey's breathing and the steadying presence of my daughter at my side, I felt a deep sense of resolve. The storm had raged, deception had been exposed, and yet hope persisted. It was fragile, delicate, yet undeniable. We would move forward, step by careful step together, and we would emerge stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The trap had sprung, the first victories had been won, and the future, though still uncertain, was now ours to shape. The evening air was crisp as I arrived at the upscale restaurant, Bailey trotting beside me with quiet dignity, his fur brushing against my legs, a comforting anchor amidst the tension that coiled in my chest. The table had been arranged meticulously, flowers in soft hues, candles flickering gently, every detail designed to convey calm and civility. Yet beneath the elegance, a storm was waiting. I could feel it, taut and buzzing in my veins, as I glanced at Rachel. Her hand finding mine briefly before she let go, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and tentative hope. Tonight, the truth would finally step into the light. Guests arrived in a polite murmur, both families mingling uneasily. Key community members seated strategically, their expressions polite but wary. I moved with deliberate grace, Bailey trailing silently behind, his eyes bright and aware, sensing the fragile tension and protecting it. I had arranged for Amanda, Derek's real wife, to be here as well. Thanks to the diligence of a private investigator I trusted implicitly. When she arrived, I introduced her quietly, offering a brief explanation of what we had uncovered. Her eyes widened as I laid out the documents, the messages, the evidence of Derek's betrayal, his manipulation, and his lies. She placed a trembling hand over her mouth, nodding in disbelief, her own shock tempered by the quiet dignity she exuded. The clatter of cutlery and murmured conversations filled the restaurant as Derek arrived. Flanked by his lawyers, his confident, arrogant posture a mask he wore with habitual ease. He expected confrontation, a scenario he thought he could control, yet the moment he stepped into the room, the air shifted. Amanda moved forward, her gaze steady, her voice clear despite the tremor of suppressed emotion. "You told me your mother died," she said, her voice breaking, yet loud enough for all to hear. "You've been stealing from your children's college fund?" The words hung in the air, reverberating like a clap of thunder, unmasking deception that had festered in shadows for too long. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, the murmur of shocked recognition rippled through the gathered guests. Reporters I had discreetly tipped off were already rolling cameras, capturing the drama as it unfolded. Derek's mouth opened, words failing him as disbelief and rage wrestled within. Caroline Sterling, her usual polished composure faltering, attempted to retreat toward the exit, but I stepped forward, my voice calm but filled with undeniable authority. "Your family tried to destroy mine. You laughed when your son humiliated me. Now the world knows who you really are." The words were deliberate, measured, but carried the weight of truth, echoing in the stunned silence of the room. Derek lunged at me, a desperate surge of anger and entitlement, but Bailey was faster. His low growl grew into a thunderous bark as he positioned himself between us, teeth bared, stance firm and unyielding. Security moved immediately, pulling Derek back, restraining him from further aggression. My chest heaved, adrenaline still coursing, yet a sense of relief settled over me. A tide of control returning after weeks of tension, fear, and uncertainty. Bailey's presence remained a grounding force, a reminder that loyalty, courage, and love could face even the most aggressive threats without faltering. Rachel stepped forward, her voice tentative at first, then growing steadier with each word. "I want a divorce, and I want to press charges." Her hands shook, her eyes glistening with tears, but there was resolve in her tone that made my heart swell. For months she had been manipulated, isolated, and deceived, yet in this moment, she reclaimed her agency, her power, and her dignity. I pulled her close, letting her lean into me, feeling her tremors settle slowly against the warmth of my embrace. Bailey nuzzled between us, a soft, comforting presence, anchoring us both as the storm of confrontation unfolded around us. I scanned the room, the faces of the Sterling family, the reporters, the community members, and felt a quiet sense of vindication, not for revenge, but for justice, for truth, and for the reclamation of integrity that had been threatened. Every betrayal had been exposed, every lie laid bare, and in their unmasking, a profound sense of relief and moral clarity emerged. The confrontation was not about humiliation or vengeance. It was about restoration, healing, and the recognition that deceit could not survive the light of truth. Amanda moved closer to Derek, her children standing quietly behind her, their innocent faces filled with confusion and guarded hope. Derek's expression flickered between rage, disbelief, and helplessness. The carefully constructed persona of control shattering in the wake of exposure. Caroline Sterling remained frozen, her attempts at escape thwarted by the weight of truth confronting her directly. I felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered with empathy for the damage done, for the lives manipulated, and for the possibility of redemption that, perhaps, might still exist somewhere, far from the reaches of greed and manipulation. Rachel leaned against me, voice low, almost a whisper. "Thank you, Mom, for believing in me, for seeing through him." I held her tighter, letting the warmth of our connection, the gentle rhythm of Bailey's breathing, and the presence of justice restored, fill the quiet spaces in our hearts. This moment was more than a confrontation. It was the reclaiming of our dignity, our trust, and the affirmation that even the darkest deception could not overpower love, loyalty, and the courage to stand firmly in truth. As the evening drew on, the restaurant's elegance serving as a backdrop to the drama, I felt a profound shift within myself. I had fought not only for my daughter, for the company, and for justice, but also for the affirmation that integrity and courage were timeless forces, capable of piercing the deepest shadows. Bailey rested his head on my lap, Rachel leaning against my side, and in that quiet, grounding circle, I realized that vindication was not only about exposing wrongs, it was about healing, reclaiming, and stepping into the light of a future rebuilt on truth, love, and unyielding strength. 6 months had passed since the storm of deceit, betrayal, and confrontation had engulfed our lives. The world felt quieter now, more grounded, as if the chaos that had once dominated every waking moment had finally begun to settle into a rhythm of healing. Derek was serving time for fraud, bigamy, and embezzlement, a legal reckoning long overdue. The knowledge that justice had finally been served brought a sense of closure. Yet it was a quiet one, tempered with the awareness that the wounds left behind required time and care to fully mend. Julian had taken a plea deal, acknowledging his role in the financial manipulations. While Robert Sterling had resigned from all positions, his legacy shattered, his reputation irreparably damaged. The power dynamics had shifted, irrevocably, and the air of control that had once hovered over Sterling Industries now belonged to me. I had been appointed permanent CEO of the company, a responsibility both exhilarating and humbling. With the transition came a renewed purpose. Sterling Industries would no longer be a place where greed and entitlement thrived unchecked. I had renamed it Sterling Resilience Corp., a reflection not only of the company's enduring strength, but also of the resilience that I, and those around me, had cultivated in the face of betrayal. The board entrusted me with its future, and I vowed to use that trust with care and intention. One of my proudest achievements was establishing a foundation within the company dedicated to helping women escape financial abuse, empowering them to reclaim autonomy and dignity in their lives. Rachel had stepped into the role of director, her passion and intelligence guiding the foundation, and I watched her flourish with quiet pride, knowing that the trials we had endured had not broken her spirit, but strengthened it. Morning walks with Bailey had become a sacred ritual for Rachel and me. The park, with its dew-speckled grass and soft morning light, had transformed into a space where we could rebuild our relationship, step by patient step. I watched Rachel laugh softly at Bailey's antics, the dog bounding ahead, tail wagging furiously, before doubling back to nuzzle her hand. We spoke of small things at first, favorite books, old memories, the color of the sky, but gradually, the conversations deepened, touching on fears, dreams, and the quiet gratitude that comes from surviving a storm together. Bailey seemed to sense every subtle shift in our emotions, his brown eyes reflecting empathy and unwavering loyalty. Amanda and her children had received full restitution, a tangible affirmation that justice could extend beyond our household, beyond the immediate circle of those directly harmed. Over time, we had developed an unlikely friendship with her, built on shared experiences of betrayal by the same man and the mutual understanding that healing was best approached together. We laughed quietly over tea, compared notes on coping strategies, and shared the small triumphs of our children, each milestone a reminder that life could regain its sweetness even after profound disruption. On my 63rd birthday, Rachel threw me a small party, intimate and heartfelt. As I walked into the softly lit room, the aroma of vanilla and citrus mingling in the air, I saw her smile, genuine and radiant, and felt a rush of emotion I could scarcely name. "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't see who you really were. Someone who fights for what's right," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. I pulled her into an embrace, feeling the warmth of our restored bond settle into my bones, a balm for months of pain, confusion, and heartbreak. Bailey dozed quietly at my feet, occasionally lifting his head to look at us, a gentle sentinel of the peace that had begun to envelop our lives. In that moment, surrounded by the subtle laughter of friends and family, I realized that some battles are worth fighting, not for pride or vengeance, but for truth, love, and the integrity of one's life. Later that afternoon, as the sun slanted through the curtains and Bailey sprawled contentedly across the carpet, my phone buzzed. A message from the board flashed on the screen. 3 other women had come forward with stories about Derek's family targeting them. My chest tightened with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. This was more than just a continuation of legal proceedings. It was an opportunity to extend the support, protection, and empowerment that Rachel and I had cultivated together. I scratched Bailey's ears, feeling the silky warmth of his fur against my fingers, and whispered, "What do you say, boy? Should we help them too?" His soft, approving sigh and the gentle wag of his tail felt like an unspoken yes, a reminder that loyalty, courage, and compassion were forces that could ripple outward, transforming lives beyond the immediate circle of our own experience. The journey had been long, marked by betrayal, tears, fear, and uncertainty. Yet the destination was real, a life reclaimed, dignity restored, and the quiet but profound certainty that love and integrity could endure even in the darkest times. Rachel laughed softly at some memory from our past. Bailey nudged her hand with his nose, and I felt a sense of completeness that no title or recognition could ever capture. Together, we had navigated the storms, faced the deceit, and emerged resilient. Our bond stronger than ever, our sense of purpose renewed, and our hearts quietly, irreversibly healed. Life, I realized, was rarely about the battles won alone. It was about who stands beside you through them, who offers steadfast loyalty and love when the world seems ready to crumble, and how courage, integrity, and kindness can illuminate even the darkest paths. As I glanced at Rachel, at Bailey, and at the life we had painstakingly reconstructed, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope. The future was ours to shape, grounded in truth, compassion, and the unbreakable bonds of family. If you enjoyed Maureen's journey and want to see more stories of resilience, courage, and heart, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tellies.